Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. My name's Loretta Cohen. I work with an organization called Westchester
Yo
Community
trabajo con la organización que se llama Westchester.
Area School District for many, many years. And part of that partnership is this a parent speaker series where we work together to choose topics that will be applicable to raising kids today. We don't just randomly pick topics out of the sky. We actually have a lot of data that we use to determine what things are looking like in today's world. We also try to use a lot of parent feedback. And I want to just take a quick minute to tell you not too much about that data. We'll also use data from the good old internet and merge some things together. But I wanted to explain a little bit more. We don't just do the parent speaker series. We also, from that data, because we're passionate about data not just sitting in a box or sitting online, we want to make sure that that gets into a format where you can use it and access it as parents. So, for example, some of the data points that we've been looking at recently revolve around connection and youth mental health. We've seen a decline in how well connected kids are, not only with their families, but with friends, as being part of clubs and groups, but also in their communities. So, we put together this public health campaign based on a lot of input from area professionals, human service professionals, education, faith, parents, all coming together and weighing in on the most important data points and how we can best address those. So we also do similar things with youth. We work directly with youth as well as part of something called our Thrive projects. We pull those kids together and they really look at what are the ways youth thrive. They pulled together this t-shirt. So these are just some examples that they came up with. They try to put these messages again, not just leave the information in a box or on a piece of paper, but get them out in the world. So they throw their t-shirts out into the crowds at local football games, trying to promote these messages that they know will positively impact their peers. This year, the kids did a campaign around sleep. They put them in the playbills for local high school theaters. They have it on a billboard right now in the west end of town. They've put ads about alcohol on Instagram feeds, and you can see this one girl on the right here created her own ad about alcohol that we had professionally reshot by marketing professionals and put up on this transit shelter outside the Wawa on Westchester Pike. They're really exciting projects. The kids really grab hold, love taking the information and finding ways to get it out in front of their peers. We love having that project, doing that project with them. We are looking for parent representatives from each school to connect with us, be involved in our coalition, be involved in our planning process for next school year. And so I'm putting this out here tonight. I hope that some of you will consider this. My contact information is down here at the bottom, mobilizer@wcctc.org. And I hope that some of you will come on board with us and help make sure what we're doing is in line with what you're seeing. And, you know, power in numbers, we'd love to have you. So that's a little about us. But tonight is, like I said, one of those parent speaker series. And tonight is all about love, limits, and listening. So we're going to dive into that topic. The overview really is that using love and limits really gets us to healthy relationships. And that's really our goal, not just inside our home, although that's a big one, right? Anybody who's raising kids, we like it better when everybody's getting along. So we want to learn how to use love and limits to achieve that. And then also outside the home, how connections, like I mentioned, we've noticed in the data that that's really important to talk about, how they help us know our value and self-worth as a human being, how healthy communication, what are some strategies for that? Because communication really goes hand in hand with establishing good connections and healthy relationships. Throughout, I'm going to be smattering this idea. Parents are super, super powerful figures in children's lives. And so it's really incumbent on us to think about how we can use our power for good. We don't always recognize how much power we have. I think we can sometimes just say the littlest thing and it really impacts our kids in a big way. Also, what we think and believe means more to our kids really than what anybody else thinks or believes. And so there is social science data to back that up. We know it seems a lot that they believe and value what their friends say more than us. And they do value what their friends say, but over the long term, it's really parents who have more power than friends do. So let's dive in to some of this. I wanted to start with a couple of quotes from, this is Dr. Shefali. I don't know if anybody's familiar with her. She's been really promoted and highlighted by Oprah, and she really just does a nice job. Something that I find to be really important, and it's this idea of separating ourselves from our children, right? Which is very difficult to do because we use language of they're my children, my daughter, my son, right? We talk about them as if we own them. And so we really don't. And so it's difficult because our language doesn't coincide with this line of thinking to remember that they are very separate and distinct from us. So if they are, going through a thing, if they are succeeding or failing or whatever, it is their issue, it is their feelings, it is there that we have to somehow separate ourselves a bit, still be very, very involved, but not own their issues, not own their problems, and help them learn to advocate and move through life for themselves. So there was, rather than read this for you, hoping you read that while I was talking. Yes, I like this one a lot because of the second part of this, right? We're not raising a mini me, even though they act, look so much like us, sound like us. But the second half of this, the fact that our kids are a spirit throbbing with their own signature, I just think that's so descriptive, right? And we just really have to remember how much they are their own individual person. So hang on to that as a little bit of background as we move through the things. Reminder, our goal tonight is in life where we're trying to get to for our kids with this conversation is healthy relationships. So if we're on this journey with them, alongside of them, there are two things we can put in place that are going to provide safety rails, right? They're going to keep our kids on track. And one is love and one is limits. That it will not work well with only one or the other. We can have super, super strong limits and not in the context of love, too heavy-handed, and it comes off not as caring and nurturing, but as restrictive and mean, right? So we need to balance both those. On the flip side, if we have just love track, we're also going to fall off the rails. Keep using the same analogy. If we have just love and not enough limits, we can also have a lot of problems because the kids feel like they're spectacular, but also feel very entitled and feel like they should be able to have whatever they want. I know, you're a parent today, probably since you're on this call, you know that tracks in our child's life doesn't just go down this nice, even path. Life in reality looks a lot more like this set of tracks. So I always like in these conversations to really put out there, we're all in this together. My kids are in their mid-20s and I still get to these points where I go, am I supposed to parent to the left or parent to the right? Which is the best way to go here with this particular predicament we're in right now, or question, or that my kids are having. So take a deep breath. We're all in this together. We know that it's not a straight line. I wanted to mention this idea of limitation versus limits, because limitations we talk about say, oh, don't let people put limits on you. You can do whatever you want. The sky's the limit. The world is your oyster. That's the idea of limitation, something that's internal. You don't want limitations. These are all true statements. We want to fill our kids with positivity, with the sense that they can do anything, that they are powerful humans. They can make good choices and they can do anything. That is a great mentality to have with kids, but it's very different from limits, which are something that are imposed upon you from outside. They're external, whereas limitations are more internal. Limits sound negative in today's world. We look at them and say, oh, we're told, oh, we have to do something. And it comes with a lot of negative connotation, but we have limits all over our society, right? And so it's super important that kids learn to live within limits, because they're going to have to, right? Our traffic laws work really well. We prevent a lot of injury and death because we have so many limits on our driving. It works really well. And similar, we have, one of the things is that those make sense to us, right? If stop signs were here in the middle of a big fat open road, how many people would stop at them? And so I want you to think about this when you're deciding on limits for your kids. Are they reasonable and do they make sense? That's something that's super important, because kids are going to burst through those limits, just like you and I would probably drive through this stop sign. Or we'd stop and go, what is going, why is there a stop sign here? We'd stop the first time, but the next time there was a stop sign there that didn't make sense, right? Eventually we're going to be like, okay, this is silly. So are they reasonable? Do they make sense? Oh, this was the picture for the equating it to our children. Yeah. So that's same thing. We don't want to be so super restrictive that our kids feel boxed in for no reason. Benefits of limits are many. We did do an entire presentation on setting boundaries with kids, which is very similar to what I'm talking about right now. If you want to know more about this, we have this presentation on our YouTube channel, and you will be sent a link to this at the end of the session to either watch this recording, or you can check out that boundary setting video as well. But real quickly, the limits, they offer security for kids because it gives them predictability. They know what to expect. When they know there's going to be food on their plate, they don't have to worry about being hungry. They know that bedtime's at 8, and they know that that doesn't change, right? They know that they can't whine their way out of it. Then that's comforting to a child and really, really good. Well, the bedtimes are very good for their physical health, but also very good for their mental health, to have consistency where they know what the standards are and they know that rules will be enforced. It goes a long way for, like I mentioned before, preventing entitlement. Kids understand they can't just have whatever they want whenever they want. And it teaches them self-control and discipline, that they can have X amount of time for screen time, and when and how are they going to choose to use that. So that helps them learn how to control themselves as they get older and they don't have mom and dad watching. And it helps enrich their interpersonal relationships, right? Again, which is what I said, where we're headed. We want these to end up with them being able to have strong, healthy relationships with lots of people, not just siblings, not just mom and dad, but outside in the big world as well. These are a quick set of tips. I'm just going to shout out a couple. I already talked about being reasonable, being consistent. Again, super, super important. That's probably one of the biggest here. And explaining your reasoning. if you can explain it and it makes sense to you, then that's a good sign. This because I said so is not healthy. We all have days where we pull that one out because we're exhausted. If you say because I said so, don't beat yourself up about it. But when you're in a better frame of mind, think about the reason for the rule and make sure your child knows. Be prepared to adjust your limits as your kids age. They are going to change. And again, as I mentioned, if you want more on this topic, our setting boundaries presentation is on our YouTube channel, and we'll get you the link. But this is one of those areas where you can definitely use your power for good, right? And that is what I started with, which is that beautiful balance between the love and the limits. Remind yourself that having strict, I think one of the things I say is have the expectations be high. Your kids can meet those. They can meet high expectations if they're fair and they're reasonable and you're consistent with them. If you're sometimes high and sometimes low, then that's not really using our power for good. It ends up being too hard for the kid to make sense of. So use it for good in love and for limits. This is the love section. The love section is talking about making sure that our kids know that they are the cat's pajamas. So, I mean, just we want our kids to know that they are fabulous. They're great exactly the way they are. They don't need to become president of the United States in order to get your approval. All they have to do is be themselves. They're allowed to have bad days. They're allowed to be cranky. We all have bad, cranky days, right? So in those moments when they're cranky, sure, that's hard. But we want to just make sure our kids know that they are fabulous. I have tended to say to people that the world will tell them where their shortcomings are. They don't really need to be reminded of them left and right. They need to, if they've broken a rule, that needs to be enforced. But again, the balance, right? So, two things. We're working under the premise tonight that there are these two angles that make up this love section, and that is connection and communication. You can put the word healthy before any of those. We want healthy connections and healthy communication. I just love this picture. We don't only want it with parents having outside influences in your kid's life, other people outside your immediate family who think your kid is the cat's pajamas is really, really good for kids. Having a mentor in a formal or informal capacity, really, really great for kids. One of these things that happens, again, this is a section of using your power for good, is that from the time kids are very, very young, they are responding to what their parents do. We have these mirror neurons in our brain, and they set up pathways, and they tell us when things are good, and they tell us when things are not good. They tell us I think this really describes it, right? So if you look at this dad looking at his baby, it makes me smile. I'm guessing that there's people on this Zoom who are looking at this picture and also smiling. And that's our mirror neurons. They're responding to the joy in that picture, right? If I showed you a picture of anything sadder, and maybe if you really hone in on that little blonde girl's face, your mirror neurons will change, right? You're responding. We're very, very social creatures. So from even before 12 months old, these mirror neurons have been proven to respond to another person. So if you're smiling and responding and back, you can build these neural pathways, not only when they're young. Oh, this was my little throwback to the pandemic, right? It's why one of the reasons the pandemic years were so hard on parents, because children just simply don't know what to do with an adult when they're not being responded to, right? They crave that feedback. They love it. It engages them. It builds all sorts of pathways in their brain. And not just when they're younger. When they're older, mirroring for kids at any age lets them know that their emotions are good. And again, even the uglier emotions, right? Like anger and sadness, they're still okay emotions to have. We don't want to paint those as a bad way. So these parents are engaged with their kids. One looks serious, one looks sad, and you can see the parents mirroring that. They're saying, "I'm here for you. I get it, and what you're going through, the way you're feeling is okay to feel that way." So again, we have so much power as parents. This is what's happening as we do that with our kids. The neural pathways are getting stronger and they get more and more, they're called dendrites that grow off of each neuron. They keep just growing and growing and expanding. The more we use them, the more we do that, the stronger they get and the more they build. So that use it or lose it mentality. So if you're engaging in healthy ways with your kids when they're young, that gets stronger and stronger. Then they learn to take that out into the world and they learn what healthy connection looks like. And they can do it for themselves with friends. They'll recognize and be able to trust their gut when they're engaged with someone who it's not a healthy friendship. They're, because they have good dendrite systems, they have good neurons, right? They were all built up nice and strong. And they go, something doesn't seem right with that girl who's lying to me all the time, right? Then again, that's what I mean by it's able to help them as in the future to move past that. So much power, no pressure. Okay, pressure. But again, I'm also a big fan of not beating ourselves up for the times we make mistakes. Parenting doesn't come with a handbook or it comes with 1,000 handbooks. You can go online, right, and find a million different suggestions for things. So we're not going to do it perfect every time. We can move past that and go back. The fact that you're here tonight doing this, listening in on this presentation already tells me that you're a great parent. So the idea is to keep reminding ourselves of what these things are that are important, and they will come to the forefront when we're faced with challenges with our kids. So as part of my job, I mentioned earlier on Westchester Communities That Care, and that we sit down with a group of parents and professionals and we look through data and determine what's most impacting kids in our communities, right? What's most impacting Westchester area kids right now? And one of those things was connections. And so that group of parents and professionals came up with these 3 sections that they thought were really key. And they were a sense of self-worth, a sense of belonging, and a sense of value. Remember that all lead toward healthy relationships. And so what I want to do is take a second to let you know what those conversations look like. For the sense of self-worth, they talked about a respect for autonomy. Like if we want our kids to have a good sense of self-worth, healthy connections involve respect of the person as an individual. So back to those quotes by Dr. Shefali that I mentioned in the beginning. We're going to understand that our young people are their own individual humans. They may not do everything the way we do it. They may not agree with us. And that has to be okay. We can say our piece and then they get to make their decisions. Acknowledgement of their inherent awesomeness. That's my cat's pajamas, right? So those we already talked about. Predictability. We talked about that with our limits. We want to make sure that our kids understand what rules are inside our home and that the consequences are going to be consistent. Does an amazing job for connections. If you had a friend who said, let's meet for lunch. And you said, yeah, that sounds great. And then they don't show up. And the next time they say, let's meet for lunch. And then they are a half hour late. And then they say again, let's meet for lunch. And you say, okay. And you show up and they forgot they had a doctor's appointment that day, right? You start to, that's not a good connection. All of a sudden, right? That person, you can tell that you're not a priority there. That connection you had with that person is not quite as strong. So predictability is really important. Presence, really, really big one, is this idea of being really present, really there and listening, actively involved when your kids are in the room. This is probably today with social media and technology, cell phone use, having that right in our hand makes it way harder than it ever was before. So that's not the only thing that draws our attention away. It can even sometimes it's out of our control. Sometimes the dog is barking like mad, or the doorbell rings, or there are things that get in the way. We can't always prevent them all, but doing everything we can to have dedicated time with our kids is really valuable. They understand that you have the ability to carve out something just for them. Goes a really long way. Giving opportunity to your kids for them to engage, right? Again, this is opportunities, whether they're in your home or outside your home, to connect. Some usually fun. I look at it and say they could be learning something, but having fun is one of the best things. And if you combine the two, they're having fun and learning something new. That's amazing. But opportunities aren't always like you have to go to the art museum or you have to do something where you're paying for something. A great opportunity for connection is to go run around outside during a rainstorm, right? Doesn't cost a dime. Like you come back inside soaking wet, and I guarantee you everyone will be laughing. And I don't care how old your kids are. We always feel like, oh, they get older. It gets harder to do things like that. They don't have that same silliness factor as kids start to age, but people still love to be kids. They still love to have fun, and kids love to have fun with their parents. Giving responsibility and trust, those two really go hand in hand, right? If we expect the best from our kids, they are more likely to rise to that. So that's a really big one. And offering responsibility again allows you to say, I trust you. I know you can handle this. And also where you're needed here. You're such a big help emptying the dishwasher, whatever the chores might be. They're really valuable for strong connections. A lot of that has to do, and we've been talking about inside the home. We're going to move and talk a little bit with a sense of belonging, which happens inside the home, but also outside. Clubs, groups, organized or informal, just groups of friends. Really important for kids to feel like they have a sense of belonging. This particular list came from on somewhere I found online. I loved it though, because present, they write being really present. We talked about that before. But every other word here is a verb. When you look at that, it's not pillars of belonging is how you feel. You feel welcomed, you feel known and accepted and supported, blah, right? All those. But they're verbs as well, which means it's something we can actively do. We can actively accept our children for who they are. We can actively need our children to empty the dishwasher, count on them to do it, and respond accordingly, as reminding them of how very helpful they were by doing their chores. And that's the same when they are now moving beyond the family and their friendships. This is what we want to encourage our kids. We don't have any control over anybody else's kids. And we can wish that our kids would be welcomed and known and accepted, but we can teach our own kids to be those things for other people. This was what our group said when they were talking about peer connections. They talked about modeling it for inside your home, modeling it yourself, your connections with your spouse. Are you modeling healthy relationships in front of your kids? And talk openly about healthy or maybe unhealthy relationships. If you had a relationship with a friend that wasn't healthy, how did you handle it? So always good for kids to hear and feel like they can talk with parents about that kind of stuff. Help them enforce relationship boundaries. When you have boundaries at home and set limits, right? It's going to be easier for them to understand that boundaries are just something people have, and it'll help them be able to set them with their friends. It'll help them be able to say, I'm not going to sneak into a R-rated movie, right? No, I'm 13. I go to PG-13 movies, whatever. I'm making something up. But it helps them set boundaries if they're feeling pressured into something. Getting to know their friends is huge. It feels like something that's probably seems on the surface really understandable. Of course, you want to get to know their friends. They don't always choose friends that you think are that amazing people. So what do we do when they're in a friendship with somebody who you're seeing sort of the downside of those friendships? Still really important to make an effort to get to know them. Talk with your kid about what they like about their friends. I love that question. Oh, I use it now. My kids have boyfriends and I go, what do you like about them? Like what is that thing that you like? Um, Teach quality over quantity. It's really hard in today's world with how many friends you have on Instagram or Snapchat. You really only need one or two friends who will do those pillars that we talked about before, who really know you, accept you, need you, and support you, right? It's going to be a reciprocal thing. And those are the ones that matter. They're really the only ones that matter. This 100 friends that can't be that for you and you don't have that same connection are overrated. Celebrate authenticity, right? So you can help your kid by celebrating theirs. Every quirky thing about them, if you can help celebrate that, it will help them be confident about it out in the world. And then appreciating FOMO, because if they do feel like other people have 100 friends and they have one or two, they might really have a fear of missing out. That's what FOMO is, a fear of missing out. And that's really hard. Sometimes our kids just need us to sit next to them and say, geez, that stinks, right? Ugh, what a terrible feeling, and hug them. There are some things we can't fix. Again, we can change ourselves. We can't change other people. So Pierre, we talk a lot again about this not being just for things in the home, beyond family, then friends. We also want to talk about what that looks like out in the community. So far, we've been talking about our kids understanding their self-worth, that they have value, they have inherent value just being who they are. And they're helpful, they have value because they do chores around the house, right? They can actually do things that are of value. And so we want to switch that as they move out into the world to be having inherent value to also having value, not just that they are valued by other people, but they have value in the world. This is the idea. And again, I think this one is a huge factor in our mental health. It lets us know that the space we take up on the planet matters. And on our darkest days, we need to know this, right? So this is what we talked about with community connections. This can start from a pretty young age. Pick your passion. And what your passion is when you're 5 might not be your passion when you're 15. But help support kids to find a way to give back. And everybody can give back. Kids could write notes and leave it on a stranger's windshield in the parking lot. Just says, I hope you have a great day. Done. I mean, absolutely any way that your kid holding the door for somebody, helping somebody with their groceries, and letting your kids see you help people in ways like that is worth a fortune. Because remember in the beginning, all that power that I said you have, they're watching you constantly. I know the pressure is awesome, but when they see you do those little things, they learn from them. So, whatever your kids are involved with, if it's a volunteer, a way they're volunteering in the community, maybe they go in and play with kittens at the SPCA. I don't know. Whatever they're doing, be positive about that engagement. If they're schoolwork, be positive about school and their engagement. It's contagious. And I'm bringing up school. Sharing a commitment to school is another one of those data points that we look at that has actually been on the decline lately. Over the last several years, we've watched a commitment to school on the part of kids decline. And being positive about the environments your kids spend 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, that's a lot of time that they are spending in those buildings. They need to know that you're supportive of that you're engaged with that, and whether or not you're in those buildings volunteering or not, that you value what they're doing there. So prioritize mentorship. Again, another huge one. They say a child needs one trusted adult in their life, and maybe that's you, and that's really great because that's really up there, having parents directly in your house that those trusted adults. Having someone outside the home who also sees that inherent awesomeness in your kid is really valuable. It's one of the reasons I love this idea of volunteerism so much. It gives kids the opportunities to do something and be a part of something separate from mom and dad. It might be together with you when they're very young, but I would encourage you to look at these opportunities for them to foster independence. As they start to get older, find ways to step away. I have a volunteer position that I've been involved with for 30 years. I've been involved with the same organization, and my kids, because they grew up in the organization, they wanted to volunteer there as well. And when they got involved, I said, sure, love to have you. And the person who was scheduling everybody said, oh, I'm going to put your kids with you. And I said, please don't. And what was able to happen was that they were able to meet and connect with other adults separate from me. They were in a different part of the organization doing a different job. And those adults were able to look my kid in the eye and say, that was amazing. How hard you worked, how great you did with that project, with that student, how you helped there, that idea you thought of. And it's all coming from somebody else other than the parents. So again, I feel very passionate about that one. So this is where we're headed, right? When we get all three of those things in all three of those arenas, at home, with friends, and also with other trusted adults in a more community-based kind of setting, you end up with a kid who is just saying, I'm great. I know I'm great. And you're great just how you are. And that's what makes those healthy relationships that will stick with somebody throughout. That brings us to communication, right? So we talked about connection and communication being these two peas in a pod that are helping us have these supportive, healthy relationships with our kids. And communication is really tricky. Again, we'll be mirroring with their feelings. That has a lot to do with validating what they're going through, even when we don't agree necessarily with their thoughts, where we need to understand that the thoughts they're having are their own, and they're okay to have them. They're allowed to change their mind someday if they want to. So let's see how we went with this. So some fundamentals, I'm calling them. Again, we go back to, you're going to see a lot of this has to do, same with the connection, this uninterrupted time. There's one of my favorite stories to not come out of my family. Someone told me that they used to have a blanket that they would put down on the family room floor when their kids came home from school. And there is something about having that tangible thing, whether it's the kitchen table or, whatever. But for this family, it was this blanket. And she set out the blanket and everyone came and sat on the blanket. And that's where they talked about their day. And she said it was years later, they had stopped doing the blanket thing. And her teenage son came home and said, Mom, I think we need the blanket. So it meant something to him, that history, that tradition. There was a tradition built around this uninterrupted time. So just an idea. Feel free to steal it. I don't think this mom would mind. But definitely carving out the time that says, I'm here for just you. Both active and reflective listening. So active listening is that I hear you, responsive, being responsive, listening, not looking for an answer, right? You don't try to solve their problem for them. It's important that they know that you heard them. And reflective listening is the way to do that. You can respond by repeating back to them, is this what you're saying? Really great tool. I think this is what I'm hearing. Wow. Wow, that sounds difficult. Wow, that must be hard is a great line to be saying back to kids, because teenagers, half the time, they don't want you to tell them what to do. And if they want you to, they will pretty directly tell you, I need you to tell me what to do. Even then, I'm not sure you need to. Remember, we're trying to create individuals who are confident and learn how to make their own decisions. We want to be offering our kids this trust. Super hard for parents because we spend their younger years doing everything for them, taking care of them completely. And so that shift that happens is really, the line is wavy, right? Of when they need you to do it for them and when they need you to back off. So a lot of times we end up in the doing it for them longer than we need to be in that space. So again, we're not going to do it right every time, but by talking it out and reminding ourselves, just by listening to this presentation tonight, we remind ourselves, okay, I gotta let them handle things. They can handle it. And most things, honestly, aren't life or death decisions. If they were life or death decisions, we're going to step in. But most things that kids are wrestling with are not. So asking them how they're going to handle it and what they think they want to do next are great questions that let them know you are actively listening and you are in their corner without solving it for them. Praising effort is a huge communication tool that's excellent when your kids work hard at something. If it's a test, they could get an A, they could get a B, that could get a C, whatever grade they get. If you are able to talk about how hard they work to get it, that means more for the long term, because an A on one test is just an A on one test or one report card or one, when we praise their grades, they're only good as their next test score. When we talk about how hard our kids are working, that lets them know that that's the thing we value. We value the hard work. And so maybe they mow the lawn for you and the lines are all over the place, but they come in sweating and dripping wet. And they're like, you can comment on how hot it is out there and how hard it is to stick with something and do a good job, even when it's hot. And that that they'll take a break and get back out there and fix it. I'm not saying to lower the standards. I'm saying to put our focus when our communication skills put the focus on effort. It also doesn't mean that it's wrong to say, congratulations, you got an A. You can say that as well. It's just that we don't want to have that be the only thing. So encouraging self-advocacy, really letting our kids handle their situations. That's us not helicoptering or trying to do all the fixing for them, which is super tempting. Validation and a supportive tone when they're talking. Kids can see our eyes roll and sense our tone if we're not really being supportive. We have to genuinely believe that our kids can handle things. And validation, again, is this idea that you hear them and you respect their opinion as their opinion. You don't have to share it. I can remember when I was younger, and there were lyrics to a song, and she was clearly talking about, my mother thought she had some very negative thought behind the lyrics of the song, and I interpreted the song as being like, oh, peaches and cream and roses, and I'm like, no, I think it means this. And we completely diverged. It was complete. And I remember thinking, how can two people listen to the same song and hear two completely different things? But again, you can just, in those scenarios, you say, that's interesting that you heard it that way. I heard something completely different. We don't have to tell them that they're wrong. It allows them to explore things for themselves. And as time went by and I listened to that song, which I don't even remember it now, that was many, many moons ago. As I listened to the song more, I was like, oh, I think my mom was probably right about that. I also probably never told her, because as kids do with their parents, we don't always come back and tell them that they were right. But it was more meaningful that she allowed me to have my own opinion and my own thoughts, and I can come back around to a different point of view later on if I choose. Embracing mistakes, really big one. We learn so much from failure. You have learned from failures in life, and your kids are going to learn from theirs. If you can talk about them, that is really, really valuable to kids. They do not need to think that you are the perfect parent. If we try to put up a front of how perfect everything is all the time, that's a very hard measure for people to meet. So it's really valuable when we can tell kids how, oh, you missed a deadline at work. Your boss is really angry. There's reasons that you missed it, but now I don't know how to handle it, or whatever, that we struggle with the very similar things that kids struggle with, and how you handle it, and talking that the fact that you got in trouble at work and you went past it. We can survive past our failures, right? Someone else could get promoted instead of you, and that can be hard and hurt, and you can feel like that's really unfair. But if we wallow in those things, then our kids, and we don't ever get over it, we hold the grudge forever. That's what our kids learn to do. If we wallow in it for a little bit, because we're human and we're going to do that, but then they see us pick ourselves up and say, I learned something from this, and here's what I'm going to do better next time. Then that's what our kids learn. The last one here is asking questions. Questions are such a powerful tool with kids. You want to make sure that you're seeking to raise your own awareness. You want to understand their thinking, their thought process, and ask questions to provoke their thought, not to get them to change their mind, right? You need to ask questions so that they are able to think on what you had to say, not come back and say they agree with you. The minute we're seeking that, then we've missed a little bit. Feels good when they agree with us. Can't deny it, but not really what our goal needs to be. So sometimes things go off the rails or are just a little frustrating, like a kid who keeps putting their feet on the table. I don't know if you can see that in that image. You could ask 100 times or feel like you've asked 1,000 times, don't put your feet on the table. We eat here, right? Our kids sometimes just keep putting their feet on the table or whatever the thing is in your house. We're going to go back to some of those very same things or these same things that you're going to use in those scenarios, right? They work just during the everyday, but they also work when there's kind of your kids are just you you'd swear they were just trying to push your buttons, right? These are the same things you want to use, that active reflecting lesson, absolutely uninterrupted time. Somewhere separate where you have a few minutes. You're not, either one of you are not being pulled to do something else. And you can talk, what is it that makes that so hard? What do you think the consequences should be? How how can we move past this together? Right? It's a team. You guys are a team. But you want to use a lot of these same things, even when it goes off the rails. When it really goes off the rails, maybe they keep missing curfew or they're not telling you where they were. They lied about where they were. We really want to make sure that we're staying calm because our volume, our anxiety about what's going on with my kid, I can't believe she was somewhere where people were drinking, maybe, right? If we get up here about it, they need to know that we're serious. But if we're not able to still follow our rules of healthy communication in these moments, it won't it won't go as well. You want to collaborate with your kid. You want them engaged in that conversation. What is the plan moving forward? Because this, being at a house where there's drinking, unacceptable. You can have really high standards, expect them to meet them, but at this age, the problems like that, right? You want to include those kids and say, we need a plan together, something we can all agree on. And when you have that, I would put that in writing, but make sure that the kids are included and it's not just, again, the power of parents to be imposing things on the kid. You want it to be a discussion that they're a part of. And catching them being good is huge for kids at any age. They love you and they want to please you, even in the teenage years. And so when you can catch them being warm and kind to their brothers and sisters and coming home on time, knocking, our rule used to be you had to knock, you had to come in and tell me you were home. I used to make them kiss me goodnight so that I could smell if they had alcohol on their breath. So, but you set up whatever the rules are for you. And when they do meet them, make sure that you're letting them know how much that meant to you, that you're pleased by that. I see there's some things in the chat and I'm winding down here. Really parenting, we're planting seeds every day and you will not see the fruit of this labor immediately. So be patient, but the seeds you put in the ground have a lot of value. It goes a long way. This is just a quick recap of the things that we said. We're going to understand our kids as separate beings from us. When they mess up, we don't have to take it personally. When they do great, we have to let them own that. They are awesome. Always love and limits together, hand in hand, and establish connections, not just with family, but also friends and out in the community. They're all important. We're going to build their self-worth with those things, rapport, which I can't remember off the top of my head. They're in the other slide. But And we're going to try and move our kids toward so that they can be both valued by people in their lives, but also of value, having something of worth that they do, that they're a part of. Healthy communication is really key. You want to listen and seek to learn from your children what they think and feel and believe. And always use your parent power for good. You have a lot of it. So we're so grateful for everybody who's chiming in tonight, whether you're here with us live or you're watching this recording later. Anyone who watches this video can do our survey. We always appreciate the feedback. It helps us improve, continuous improvement, and also helps us to put find out what you want to see next, what we can do. I do hope that some of you all will join us for our parent committee that we're trying to pull together to help us for the 2024-25 school year. Would love to get your input and have your involvement in some of the great stuff that Westchester Communities That Care is doing. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great night.